The term signature refers to the name and the parameter types of a method or a constructor. Make sure you note, we don't talk about the return type, for example, of the method, or the names of the parameters of the method. These are not included in the signature of the method. They are not important enough to characterize a method. The two things that we care about is the name and the parameter types of a method. See an example for that you're very familiar with, the main method. What is the signature of a main method? The only things that consist of its signature is the name and the parameter type that args has. We could name args something completely different. We don't really care about the name of the parameter. What we care about is its type. There is this important rule that we need to follow, that every constructor and every method in a class need to have a unique signature. So we could have two methods that have exactly the same names, and that, maybe surprisingly, maybe not, is completely fine. However, if they have the same name, they definitely need to be having different parameter types. Here is an example of a method that could coexist in a class with the main method that we just saw. Why? What is the signature of this second main method? The signature is the name, which is the same as before, but now the parameter types are different. We have two ints, two integers, while before we had an array of strings. Suppose that we indeed have two or more methods inside the same class that have exactly the same name but different parameters. How do we know, how does Java know which method to invoke when we make a call at a different point in the code? Well, Java will match the argument types when we are invoking a method with the parameter types, and this is how it will choose which method or which constructor to invoke. This is called method or constructor overloading. We are overloading the meaning of the method name. You may have already observed overloading in all built-in classes, Java classes like the print line. If you haven't, do take a look at the Java API, for instance of the print line method, and see overloading in action. You may be wondering why overloading is allowed. It sounds like it could be done. We know how method invocation will happen when we have several methods of different parameters, but with the same name. But why do we really want to go into all that business, all that discussion? Here is an example that will show you how we could use overloading and why overloading is actually something that we want, why it is beneficial. You may recall the palindrome class and the isPalindrome method that we wrote some time ago when we were talking actually about loops. See the isPalindrome method that takes as a parameter a string. What will this method do? It will return true if the argument is a palindrome, false otherwise. What we have done here in this class is add one more method, overload the isPalindrome. The new isPalindrome method takes an int as a parameter. And this is the reason that we can have those two methods coexist in the same class. They have different signatures because the parameter type of the argument is different. Now, why would we want to do that? We would use the isPalindrome taking a string as argument in order to implement the isPalindrome taking an int as argument. All we have to do is make the int into a string and then call the isPalindrome that we have already implemented. In other words, we don't really have to duplicate code. We would do very much the same thing if we were writing the isPalindrome int x from scratch. Very few differences in the implementation. So in order to be able to take advantage of the implementation that we already have, we can take advantage of overloading and make the implementation of isPalindrome int x in the way that you see on your slide.